Alright, today we're going to be making some Swedish meatballs. Got the mixing bowl, the hamburger, 93%, ground pork. I don't know what percent of fat it is, but you can pretty much only buy one type of ground pork. We got the onions, white cooking onions, sweet, brown, fresh brown eggs, large. Well, you're supposed to use large, but I extra large because I don't really care. Nature's Promise. You can use whatever. Panko breadcrumbs. I use pink Himalayan rock salt, fresh ground pepper, nutmeg, allspice, beef broth for the gravy later. Also for the gravy, all-purpose flour, and some unsalted butter. Alright, so right now what we're going to do is we're just going to throw the ground beef and the ground pork together in the mixing bowl. It's nice to have a trash can right near you. Throw away all the crap. Don't have it hang around. Okay. Pork right in there. Okay. For some reason, pork always fucking smells whenever you open it right up. Wow. It's not that it's bad. It's like lamb. Once you open the package, it just reeks for like 10 seconds, and then it just goes away. And now, we're gonna go cut up some onions. And the way I do this is, well, first I'll cut it down the middle. All right. Cut off the top part where it sprouts, or not where it sprouts, the other end rather. And take off the first layer. But what I do is I keep the back on, because the way that I'm going to be dicing these, I want that back on there to keep everything stable. I should have my apron on right now, but I'm going to put that on later when I'm mixing the meatballs. I don't really need it right now. Alright. That all taken care of. Crap out of the way. Alright, so what you want to do now when you're cutting up these onions is you want to take the knife and you want to slice it horizontally about 3 or 4 times. It's evenly spaced apart. And you don't want to cut all the way through. You only want to go into about a ½ an inch or less to the back. And then you're going to cut it vertically, like this. Now don't worry if like a couple pieces fly out the sides. It doesn't matter. And now again, you only want to cut vertically only about till where you cut it horizontally. Alright? Now, what you want to do is you want to chop it. And when you chop it like this, what happens is every little piece comes out perfectly the same. And it's a really fast way to chop an onion, especially when you want to dice them like I do for these Swedish meatballs. You really want to keep the onions small. You don't want big onions in your Swedish meatballs. You want to dice them really small. And what happens is a lot of these little pieces of these onions when you cook them in the pan, when you pan fry them, what happens is a lot of the onions on the outside kind of like fall off while you're frying it, and that like turns into like little brown bits that it's going to be used in your sauce. So it's really it really all works together really well. The way you do the eggs is you have to you're only using the yolks, so you're separating them from the whites. And if you don't know how to do that, it's pretty easy. I'll show you real quick. You can throw away the whites if you want to. I did last time. I think I'm going to save them this time, just because I could just make like a egg white omelet if I want to, I guess. So what I'm going to do is, basically you can just use your hands. And some people use like this egg scoop method, where you crack the egg open and you kind of just roll the egg back and forth like that, and that separates the whites, which actually worked really well this time. Actually better than I thought. And now we're going to be adding 1 cup of panko breadcrumbs. So let's go ahead and do one cup. Spread that around. All good. With the nutmeg and the ground allspice, you're gonna want a half a teaspoon. So let me just get my. Not even ready here. Should be ready to do this. Let's see. Half a teaspoon. That's what I need. Half a teaspoon. All right. So since you're only adding a half a teaspoon, like you really kind of want to like, you know, you're going to be mixing this, so you kind of really want to like distribute it around. Make sure it's not in just like one little pile. Because you're really going to, you're going to be mixing the hell out of this. It's all you need is half a teaspoon for all that, you know? So, it's powerful stuff. I can smell it right now. Even with this freaking allspice, even more powerful. Shit. Yeah, this stuff you don't need a lot. It's one of those things where you just want like a little bit of a taste of in the background, kind of like just an afterthought, kind of. In the background. Even though this is what kind of makes it Swedish meatballs, is the fact that you're adding allspice and nutmeg to ground beef and ground pork, but you only need a little bit. A little bit goes a long way with that crap. So even though you think you're adding like too little, don't worry. You're adding just enough. All right, so now that we're done with those, basically salt, pepper to taste. And obviously you can't taste it while it's raw, so you're just gonna have to kind of eyeball it. I didn't add enough salt last time I made this, so I'm just kind of gonna go. So that's 1 pinch. I'm gonna give like another pinch. Maybe the rest. You're dealing with a lot of meat here, so I'm gonna give another pinch. Yeah, I'm not gonna add any more than that because I can just add more salt to the gravy if I want to. It's not salty enough, but I'm not gonna mess with it anymore. All right, with the fresh ground pepper. When you're using fresh ground pepper, if you don't have fresh ground pepper, just use regular, trash pepper, whatever you want to call it. The pre-ground pepper that you buy from the store. If you only have that, just keep in mind that you would probably need to add twice as much of that store-bought pre-ground pepper than you would of this fresh ground pepper. Because fresh ground pepper, you only need like a twist, and it's really powerful. It's not old. You know, it's really, so I'm just kind of eyeballing it right now. Salt and pepper to taste. I mean, I'm guessing that's pretty good. Okay, so now we mix. So this is the fun part. Yeah, basically, you just get into it. You don't want to use like a whisk or some pussy fucking, excuse my language, some pussy, you know, rubber spatula or whatever. Get in there with your hands, you know, and make sure when you do it, you do it fluffy. You really want to keep it light and mix it around. You don't want to crush anything. And when you're doing this, you know, you're gonna feel a lot of onions, and you're gonna feel those panko breadcrumbs. Those aren't regular breadcrumbs. These are stiffer, bigger breadcrumbs. When you think about breadcrumbs, you're like, oh, you know, Italian breadcrumbs are like, you know, just dust. These are like grains of like gravel, almost. If you want to put it to comparison to anything, you really want to mix this up good. So you're just gonna want to keep mixing. See how much material I'm dealing with right now? That's why I added that much salt and that much pepper. And the crazy thing is, like that little bit of nutmeg and that little bit of allspice goes a long way in all of this meat. I mean, it still boggles my mind. But seriously, it's like, you don't mess around with that stuff. You really don't. Every time I add it, every time I make Swedish meatballs, I'm like, yeah, this doesn't seem like enough. It always is, though. It always is. You know, the mixing process, you know, it's not a short process. It's a long, lengthy process. It's cold. My hands are cold, you know. It's not a great time, but you gotta do it. You gotta flip it around, you gotta mix it up, you gotta fluff it up, make sure all that pork and beef is incorporated itself, you know, all the egg yolks. Make sure all those are spread around good off the bottom. Make sure there's no seasoning hot spots anywhere. You really don't want to avoid that. You really want to avoid those hot spots. This looks pretty good. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I grabbed a big cookie sheet, and I'm going to put tinfoil down here so I avoid washing this cookie sheet if I have to. Takes up a lot of room in the dishwasher or the sink or whatever. What you want to do is a little trick. What happens is when you're making these meatballs is that a lot of the fat from the pork and the beef sticks to your hands when you're making the meatballs. So what you want to do is you want to take a plate, and you can't see what I'm doing right now, but I'm basically at the sink, and I'm taking some cold water and I'm just putting it in a plate, like a little bit in a plate. See, just a little bit in a plate, and I'm going to put that on the right side of the mixing bowl. Now what I'm going to do is once in a while I'm just going to take my palm and just dip it right in the water. Okay. Now I'm going to make the meatballs here. Now I'm not going to have the video. This making the meatballs is kind of a lengthy process, so I'm not going to I'm not going to, you know, I'm not going to waste your time having you watch me make, you know, 90 meatballs. So, I mean, even that meatball is kind of too big. I mean, when you're making these meatballs, you want to think of the size of a golf ball, and then think of like a little bit smaller than that, because essentially, outside of this being a meal, these are supposed to be like bite-sized finger foods. So, as I was saying before, my hands are now starting to get a little bit, it's getting a layer of grease from the fat on my hands now. So I don't know. If you want to count them, I don't know if you want to count them. It's like usually like one. After about 10 meatballs, you probably want to dip your hands. Dip your hands in this water. What that does, clears them up. So you can roll these things and bang them out. Because that's the whole thing. You want to bang them out. You don't want to be standing around making Swedish meatballs all night. You know? Like I've done before. It's not fun. I tell you. It's not, I mean, it's a labor of love. It really is. Because, I mean, the end product is so good, it'll last you 2 or 3 days. Everybody's going to be wanting to eat them. Nobody doesn't like Swedish meatballs. Everybody loves Swedish meatballs. I mean, that's one thing that I hold over vegetarians, is that, I mean, honestly, I like a lot of vegetarian and even vegan food. Like, I think it tastes great. Like, I eat it, like, probably half my diet is vegetarian. But I could not live without Swedish meatballs, man. And I don't know if, like, vegans have figured out a way to take nutmeg and allspice and mix it with tofu or something, but, man, Swedish meatballs. I mean, that's why IKEA is still in business. Just because people go there for the Swedish meatballs and end up buying like a piece of furniture because they feel bad or whatever. or whatever. Or because it's cheap. I wish there was an IKEA around here. I'd bring in some meatballs. Bring in these Swedish meatballs right here. Be like, what's up? These are going to be bomb. Seriously. Oh man, I can't wait until you're trying these things. I can't wait until you're trying them. Because you're going to be like, these are bomb. Oh man. Alright. This is the end result of making those meatballs. It took me about 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes. So what you're going to do now is pretty much just get right into it. You just kind of eyeball it with the amount of olive oil you're adding. I mean, you're gonna get a lot of fat off of these meatballs, so you're not gonna need a lot after the first douse. I mean, you're gonna be doing 3 batches, so you're gonna have to just keep your eye on it. Alright, so I'm gonna start adding the meatballs. Kind of want to just do this in a circular motion. I like to hit the spots where the oil pools at. That way, the oil will pool back into the center. Stuff. Now, what they say is, you really don't want to crowd the pan. That's probably good for the first batch. I'm not going to want to put any more in there. So, by the time it took me to put the last meatballs in, I'm probably going to want to flip those first meatballs I put in. Alright? Got a little brown guy going there. Brown guy going there. Now the thing is with flipping the meatballs is at first, when you're doing it, you're kind of like, shit. Like, this is going to take forever. But then, you kind of get a feel for the spatula, or not spatula, the tongs, or whatever you're using. Maybe you are using a spatula. But once you get a feel for, like, the flipping mechanism, once you get a feel for it, because you're going to be flipping the fuck out of these things, so once you get a feel for it, it's pretty much an easy piece of cake. And, you don't have to worry too much about these fucking things because you're going to be doing a ton of them. Like, I still have 80 more to go. Or whatever that is. Maybe 60? And you want to keep that temperature on low. When you're cooking them. See these ones in the front here? Yeah, they're going to cook good. Make sure you keep your pan even, too, on the heat source. And, you know, don't stress out about it, you know what I mean? They're all going to cook. Even if one gets cooked a little bit more than another one, I mean, it's all going to taste the same. No one's going to care. That's the thing about Swedish meatballs. You can't really, I mean, unless you burn the hell out of it, you can't really fuck it up. Because it's just too good to fuck up. It's like, it's unfuckable. You can kind of see what I was talking about. I mean, you can't see from over there, but some of the onions are starting to fall off right now, which is good. You want to see that. You need that for your sauce. It's one of those things you need for your sauce. But the other thing is, I forgot to tell you, was that these Swedish meatballs, because they're a lot smaller than traditional meatballs, they cook like in half the time. So that's the one good thing about cooking these meatballs, is that, you know, they do cook and they do move. They're not sitting around the pan for forever, you know. A lot of these meatballs on the side, you know, don't get attention. Make sure they get attention, because you can't really see them. They kind of sneak away from you. You know, they're kind of sneaky, and they want to hide. That's the thing about these meatballs, man. They want to hide. They don't want to be flipped. They really don't. That's one thing I gotta say about Swedish meatballs. They're stubborn little pricks, just like me. They don't want to be flipped. Yeah, there's a lot of fat in this pan. I mean, this shit is like, it's almost like deep frying it now. What I'm gonna go ahead and do is, I'm gonna go ahead and do one of these. Go like that. Roll it around a little bit. Sometimes you need to raise the temperature on this shit. What happens is, a lot of water comes out of the fat, comes out with the fat when you're cooking these meatballs. And you don't want these meatballs to start boiling. You want them to fry. You want them to brown. So if it means sticking them in the middle, stick them in the middle. It's that pork, man. I use 93% hamburger. Damn, this pork is so fatty. Turns that 93% into like 80%. It's all pork fat. I wish I had 100% lean hamburger. Alright, this one looks done right here. See? Brown on all sides. Onions hanging out. Good. So when you put it in this pan, you're gonna actually, let me just cook this one little bit more. Right there. Like I said, it's no rush. You're gonna be here for a little while. So now that all the meatballs are done, as you can see, big old bowl of meatballs. I wanted to add one thing that I wanted to tell you earlier. I added uncooked onions to this mixture. A lot of recipes out there say cook the onions for like a couple minutes till they're translucent and then add it to the beef and pork mixture, but I mean, it's not that big of a deal. Anyway, I just wanted to make that clear, so if people did want to do that, they could. Now, I'm going to be making the gravy now. With the remainder of this drippings and everything, we're going to make like a roux. So what I'm going to do is turn this up a little bit, and I'm going to add half a cup, 1 stick of unsalted butter to this already super fattening pan. Now, and let that melt. At this point, I'm going to switch to a rubber spatula because of this non-stick pan that I'm using. Unfortunately, I am going to be using a metal whisk on a non-stick pan, but I'm going to be very careful. And that's the whole thing. You can do it, but you can use metal utensils on a non-stick pan, Teflon or EBA safe or whatever. You just have to be really careful. You just have to know what you're doing. You can't really screw around. Okay, now that butter is all melted, I'm going to be adding 3/4 of a cup to about 1 cup of flour to this roux. And I'm going to be using a sifter as I do it. I'm going to turn the temperature down a little bit again. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to go ahead and pour this into here. There's about a cup in there. Go ahead and grab this whisk. And what you want to do is you want to whisk as you sift. And you have a lot of control at this point of what's happening. You see, the whole point of doing this is that you don't want the flour to clump up, because then it sucks. Normally, you're not supposed to use this much flour, but since I use like 4 pounds of meat, all those drippings add up. So that flour is going to eat up all that grease. This is looking really good. That's probably about enough. That's really thick. That's really thick. See that? That's what you want. That's what you want to see right there. Look at that. Oh man, this gravy's gonna be so bomb. No idea. I can smell it now. Insane. Okay, so on a low heat, you want to mix in this beef broth. I'm gonna bring both over here. This is a lot of beef broth. I'm making a big batch of this. I'm doubling a batch, so don't be scared when you start seeing a shit ton of broth and sauce. So what you want to do is you want to slowly put in the beef broth and whisk together at the same time. Slowly, no rush. The slower you do it, the better it's going to be. I can see it already thickening up already. Wicked bad. Oh my god. This is going to be really thick. Oh man. Holy crap. Wow. It is amazing how thick this gets so fast. Now, as you can see, that's a lot of beef broth. And I'm going to be adding a whole nother one of those. But before I do that, I really just want to make sure that it's all mixed up and incorporated here. It's very thick, especially around the edges here. Wow. But I guess you want it that thick, you know? Alright, here comes the next one. And since that flour is already pretty much mixed in with the first batch, I'm just going to go ahead and pour this in. Because it's not going to clump up anymore. I know for a fact. I'm going to raise the heat up. I'm going to raise it up to high, actually. That way, get a good boil going on this. So now, I'm going to let that boil and cool down after it boils. And then I'm going to mix in the sour cream. And I'll be right back. Okay, I'm almost done with the gravy for the Swedish meatballs. Right now, I boiled the roux, or the gravy, or whatever you want to call it, for a couple minutes. Just until it's thick enough as I want it to be. Since I added a lot of flour, it's pretty thick right now. So now all I have to do is let it cool down for a little bit before I add the sour cream, because I don't want the sour cream to curdle. You add 1.5 cups of sour cream. Now while I wait for that to cool down a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and boil some egg noodles. Alright, the egg noodles. You can use egg noodles. Another way to do it is you can use like fettuccine. Just like break them in half. Take a whole bunch of them and break them in half and use fettuccine. Since I don't have those, all I have is these egg noodles. I'm just going to use these instead. The thing about egg noodles is they don't really cook. They don't take that long to cook. Not like pasta noodles. Like, instead of 12 minutes, these take 6 minutes. So, salt. Lid. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. You want to season this because it's unsalted. So, go ahead and season it up. You can always add more, but you can never take away. So, that seems like a good amount of salt to me. Fresh ground pepper. And mix that right up. That might be fine. The other thing is, I just wish this. I wish this sour cream wasn't so cold either. All right, one more half a cup. Can't really screw up on how much sour cream you add. I mean, the more you add, the better it'll taste. Just the more diluted the seasonings will be. And then whisk that together. This is a thick sauce, man. Whew! Actually, wish I had. Well, whatever. Thicker the better, right? Actually, it really doesn't need any salt at all. It's actually perfect. Wow. Cool. So, next step. In go the meatballs. The bottom of the bowl is still warm. We'll hold the bowl like this. Gently just roll them off. Try not to lose any. Now here comes the fun part. Now, normally you wouldn't have to be doing this. Normally you would just put the meatballs right into this pan and serve it up. But since I made so many meatballs in 3 batches, there was barely any room other than the sauce being in this pan. Go ahead and take the spatula, get all the rest of this great grease out of there. This stuff is like gold. It really is. That there. Go ahead and just mix this up. Nice and juicy and good. Look at that. It's nice to see a little finished product. You know what I'm saying? After 4 hours of doing this. Maybe 5 hours. 7:30, started at 5. It's insane. Bring it over, take a look. That is some Swedish meatballs. Now, like I said, there's gonna be some like white bits in there. It might be from the flour, it might be from the sour cream, but after a day of cooking and stuff, after a day of like this sitting around and reheating it, you're not even gonna notice that stuff. So really, what I'm gonna do is what they recommend is that, or what I recommend is that that water's boiling, so in go the egg noodles. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of heat on there, bring that up to a boil, maybe simmer away some of that excess water retention in the sauce, and we're good. And that's Swedish meatballs, Willish Leeballs.